Thanks, Keith. Well, good morning, Providence Church. This is actually my fourth time here, just my first time on Sunday morning. So I appreciate the invitation. What a privilege to worship with Lance's smoking guitar on Sunday morning. Thanks so much. We're so glad you joined the Converge family, otherwise known as the Baptist General Conference. When I first met with Casey a couple of years to talk about you joining us. You are now part of a family of over 1,300 churches around the world. We're not a denomination because we don't control anything. We're just a bunch of Baptist believers who believe we can do better together than we can separately. And your support of Converge has helped us plant churches. We have planted 50 churches in the last 5 years. That's 10 churches a year we've planted here in MidAmerica, in 7 states here in the middle of America. And we have about 10 churches a year join us like yourselves just because we do so much to help and resource churches. And they're excited to be part of a worldwide vision. That's my job, is I resource and help local churches. And one of the things I do is help churches with pastoral searches. So it's been a delight to meet and work with your pastoral search team, and I am excited about the man that God is preparing right now to be your next pastor. Last night I gave the search team profiles on 4 different gentlemen, any one of which I think could be one of the men, and if it's not, we will just keep on looking, we'll just keep on searching. I'll keep providing you names. So I am excited about the next chapter in your history as you pass the leadership baton from Casey to whoever God raises up. And that's our topic this morning, is passing the leadership baton. Well, it happened at the World Championship Track and Field event in Edmonton, Alberta in 2001. America was piling up the gold medals. We were in line to take more gold medals than any other nation at the World Championships. And one of our strongest teams was the women's 4x400 relay race. And they were living up to their reputation. They are tearing around the track. They are in the lead. They have a commanding lead. They're on their way to win the gold. And as they come around the last turn, Jackie Collins, who you can see in the picture there, reaches out to pass the baton to Suzanne, I forget her last name now, sorry about that, Suzanne Williams, okay? And Suzanne grabs the baton, she takes 2 strong steps forward, then she goes to move the baton from her left hand to her right hand, and as she's running and moving the baton, it hits her chest, it floats in midair, it drops to the track. By the time she screeches to a halt and runs back to get it, the U.S. has dropped from 1st place to 4th place. And we lost the medal count at the championships. No matter how well they run the race, you don't finish well if you don't pass the baton. Now, fast forward 7 years to Beijing Olympics. Both our men's and women's 4x400 relay races are expected to win gold medals at the Olympics. And they are in the lead. And as the women's team comes around the corner in the lead, Tori Edwards is passing the baton to Lauren Williams. Lauren misses it. It hits the track. They're disqualified. Well, we've still got the men's 4x400 team. The men's team is in the lead. They come around the last track, the last lap, and Tyson Priest goes to pass the baton to Darius Patton, and Darius fumbles it. And they're disqualified and out. We have the fastest, strongest teams in the world, and both of them are disqualified because they passed the baton badly. They fumbled it. It's got to be every runner's worst nightmare. You're charging around the track. You're giving it your best. Your heart is pumping. Your legs are pounding. You're in the lead. The crowd is roaring. It's time to pass the baton. Your arm is outstretched. Your muscles are taut. Your eyes are locked. You are focused. You are going to win this race. And something goes wrong. and you hear it hit the track with a sickening thud. And all of that practice and all that discipline is down the drain. Because how well you pass the baton determines how well you finish the race. But on the other hand, when the baton is passed well, a new runner comes into the race with fresh energy and more power. They set a faster pace, and they take the team farther and faster than they could ever go on their own. And everybody benefits when you pass the baton to a new runner. And the same is true in the life of a church, because the life of a church is a lot like a relay race. We are always passing the baton from one leader to a next, from one generation to the next. And when the church passes the baton well, you get fresh leaders with new vision and new energy and new ideas to carry the church farther and faster than it ever could if one man was running forever, tired and exhausted. But when a church doesn't pass the baton well, when it loses its vision, when it loses its energy, when it loses its passion for reaching people who are hurling to a Christless eternity, well, the church is still running. They're still running their programs. They're still doing a lot of things, but they're no longer running to win. Because how well you pass the baton determines how well you finish the race. Now, right now, whether you like it or not, Providence is having to pass the baton. You are in the race. You are on the track. You are the runners. The baton is in your hands. And God is coaching you, and the angels are cheering you, and Jesus Christ is waiting for you at the end of the race. Will you run the race to win the prize? Will you pass the baton well? Will Providence Church's next lap be your best lap? That's the challenge you face this morning. So this morning's story, we're going to look at a time when Moses passed the baton of leadership to Joshua. And it wasn't just the baton of leadership. Israel was entering a whole new chapter in their history. And I believe that, Providence, you're not just passing the baton of leadership. You are entering a whole new chapter of your history. So let's look at Joshua chapter 1 and learn how to pass the baton well. Now, I'm going to encourage you to follow along. There's an insert inside your bulletin this morning. Looks like this, and I'm going to ask you to either follow along in that or follow along on the screen, just because we're all using different translations, and I'm not sure my translation matches the one you've got, so it'll be easier to follow along on this, at least for this morning, okay? And Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in Moab, as the Lord had said. And he, that's the Lord, buried Moses in Moab, in the valley opposite Beth Peor. But to this day, no one knows where his grave is. Now Moses was 120 years old when he died, yet his eyes were not weak, nor his strength gone. The Israelites grieved for Moses in the plains of Moab for 30 days, until the time of weeping and mourning was over. Now after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' aide, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I'm about to give them, to the Israelites. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon, and from the great river, the Euphrates, and all the Hittite country, to the great sea in the west. And no one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their forefathers to give them. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Do not let the book of the law depart from your mouth. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous? Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. And from how Joshua seized the baton and fulfilled God's will in his life for his people Israel, we can learn how we can pass the baton to the new pastor so you can fulfill God's will for Providence Church in Mattoon, Illinois in this moment in history. Flip over your sheet. How can we pass the baton well? Our first point this morning from the text is that leaders don't last forever. Leaders don't last forever. 10 years ago, the three major network news anchors were Dan Rather, Peter Jennings, and Tom Brokaw. Remember it? Seemed like they would be there forever. But in a short one-year period of time, Dan Rather was fired, Peter Jennings died of cancer, and Tom Brokaw retired. Because leaders don't last forever. Mike Ditka is no longer coach of the Bears, right? Phil Jackson is no longer coach of the Bulls. Bill Gates and Steve Jobs are no longer the head of Microsoft or Apple, because leaders don't last forever. Whether you're talking about business or sports or the church, leaders don't last forever. So our first verse in today's story is, and Moses, the servant of the Lord, died. Moses led the people of Israel to the very edge of the promised land. I got to tell you, Casey's high pulpit here is kind of freaking me out. Hello. Wow, if I'd known, I got to send you, pastors are going to need a step ladder to. No, I'm not going to stand behind it. Thanks for the offering. Okay, I got lost there, didn't I? Moses led the people of Israel to the very edge of the promised land, and suddenly he's gone, and the loss is huge. I mean, when the people of Israel were slaves, Moses led them to the Exodus to freedom. When the people of Israel were confused, Moses gave them the Ten Commandments. When the people of Israel were trapped in the wilderness, Moses led them safely to the edge of the promised land, and suddenly he's gone, and they weren't ready to say goodbye. And suddenly Casey's gone, and maybe not all of you are ready to say goodbye. Maybe Casey led you to the Lord, or someone you loved to the Lord, or baptized you or your children. Maybe he married you or buried your parents. And he was there at the hospital. He was there when you needed him. He discipled you. He mentored you, and you thought he was going to be here for decades. I was here just 3 months ago and met with Casey, and I thought he was going to be here for decades. And suddenly, Casey is gone, unexpectedly. Now, there's lots of reasons why leaders don't last forever, but beyond all the reasons, there's one reality, and that's only God's leadership lasts forever. God entrusts his leadership to pastors for a short period of time. So Joshua and Moses are long gone. David and Solomon are long gone. Peter and Paul are long gone. All the biblical leaders are long gone. God's leaders come and go. Only God's rule lasts forever. You see, our mission never changes, but the leaders are constantly changing, because it was never about the leaders. It was always about the mission. And leaders don't last forever, so that we remember who our true leader is. And we never put our faith in anyone else but the Lord. The second step in passing the baton well is that God gives new leaders for new times. God gives new leaders for new times because new times bring new challenges, and new challenges require new leaders. Moses had been a father figure to Israel, a shepherding leader. He shepherded them through the Exodus. He shepherded them through the wilderness. But now Israel's standing at the edge of the promised land, where they're going to have to fight desperate battles, and they need a new kind of leader. They need a warrior leader. God raises up a new leader for new times to face new challenges. So we read in verse 2, the Lord spoke to Joshua, Moses' assistant, "Now that my servant Moses is dead, you must lead my people." Now Moses had been Joshua's mentor. He had trained him, apprenticed him. Joshua was probably pretty scared to have to fill Moses' shoes, don't you think? But the good news is God never asked Joshua to lead Israel alone, because God always builds teams. So at Joshua's right hand was a man named Caleb. Fierce and courageous, he would fight against any odds for God. At Joshua's right-hand man were 12 leaders to the tribes of Israel who could guide their tribes to follow Joshua. At Joshua's right hand were hundreds of priests to help him guide the people spiritually. At Joshua's right hand were hundreds of judges that had been appointed to help him administer the nation. God never asked Joshua to lead alone. He built a team. Because whenever God raises up new leaders for new times, it's always a team effort. Like running a relay race is a team effort. Leading a church is a team effort. And during times of transition, God needs everybody on the team down on the track, running the race and doing their part, and nobody sitting up in the stands. So in the weeks ahead, God may call some of you to step up to one of your elders or leaders and say, I'll be your Caleb. I'll have your back. I will be your prayer partner. You can count on me. Or God may call some of you to step up and speak to a deacon or an elder or one of the ministry leaders around here and say, I know you've been understaffed and you're working hard and you're exhausted. I'm here to help. What can I do for you? And when God calls, will you answer? Will you do your part to get out of the bleachers and down on the field to help Providence Church through this transition? Because when God raises up leaders for new times, it is always a team effort. You lost your last pastor. You don't have your next pastor, but the race is going on, and God needs you to do your part on the field. And I'm going to ask every one of you here today, at some point today, to stop and say, Lord, is there something that you would have me to do, some part you would have me to play at Providence Church to carry the torch of leadership during this interim, to support the leaders during this interim time? Lord, you send me and I will go. God raises up new leaders for new times, and I can't tell you what your next pastor is going to be like. I can only tell you one thing. He's not going to be the same as Casey. Because God is raising up a new leader with new skills and new experience and new ideas to face new challenges. And when he arrives, he's going to need a team that's already in place. Will you be that team? The third step in passing the baton well, leadership transition takes work. Point 3, leadership transition takes work. It's God's job to send you your next pastor, but it's your job to be ready for him. And guess what? God may not send your next pastor until you're ready for him, until you've done the work to deserve him and to embrace him and to support him. There's 3 kinds of transition work that's your job to do right now, not the search team's job, your job. First is to grieve your loss to God. Grieve your loss to God. And the Israelites grieved for Moses 30 days until the time of weeping and mourning was over. The people took enough time to process their emotions and to grieve their loss. The loss of Moses was huge. Joshua was grieving the loss of his mentor and his friend. The rest of Israel was grieving the loss of the only leader they'd ever known, led him for 40 years. Only a couple of people even remembered any leader other than Moses. They had a lot to grieve. Now, this morning, some of you are grieving. Maybe the way that Casey left was confusing. I know it was confusing when I got the first email from him. You need to process your feelings of confusion. You need to give them to the Lord. Maybe the way Casey left you angry and upset. You need to process those emotions. You need to be honest with each other and honest with God about it. And then you need to give your emotions to God. And let him deal with them and heal with them so that you are ready to welcome and embrace your next pastor. Whatever you're grieving today, Give it to the Lord. The next step in the leadership transition is to give your fears to God. Give your fears to God. Passing the baton is a time of both danger and opportunity. But the danger can feel greater than the opportunity, can't it? And it must have felt that way to Joshua stepping into Moses' shoes, because God had to reassure Joshua and say, do not be terrified, do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Now, God had told Joshua to cross the Jordan River and conquer enemy territories. And that was pretty scary stuff, because Israel was outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded. Israel was outnumbered. They were one nation fighting seven, count them, seven different enemy nations. They're outnumbered. Now, they were outgunned because Israel's enemies had standing, trained armies that had weapons. Israel had no standing army, had no training, and had very few weapons. They'd been living in the wilderness for 40 years. Israel's enemies had fortified walled cities, and they could retreat behind the walls. Israel was out in the open and vulnerable. Israel was outgunned. And if all seven of those nations started to cooperate with each other and work together, they had Israel surrounded. Outnumbered, outgunned, and outmanned. I mean, surrounded. This is enough to make anybody afraid, isn't it? So God has to say to Joshua, don't be terrified, don't be afraid, because you're not alone, I'm with you. So let me ask you, what are you afraid of this morning in this transition? The future's pretty uncertain, isn't it? You don't know what it's going to hold. And maybe you're afraid of the uncertainty of the future. Maybe you're afraid of, well, will I like the new pastor? Will I like the way he preaches? Will the new pastor like me? Will he know my name? Will he be there when my family needs him? All these fears are swirling around, and God says, give your fears to me. I hold the future that you don't know, and I am with you. Take one step of faith, one day at a time, and trust me. Release your fears to me. The third work of transition that you have to do is to get ready for new challenges from God. Get ready for new challenges from God. As God says, now then, Joshua, you and all these people, get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I'm about to give them. Now, the Jordan River divides Israel's past from its future. They can't get into the Promised Land without crossing the Jordan River. Crossing the Jordan River as a whole nation, that's a pretty difficult thing at any time. But worse, when God told Joshua to do it, it was the flood stage of year. Do you have flood stage down here in the spring? We have it in Vermont, where I come from, where the roads flood over. And you'll have to drive out of your way, 3/4 of an hour to get to someplace that's 10 minutes away, because the roads are flooded. So crossing the Jordan River at flood stage wasn't difficult. It was impossible. The river was too wide, it was too deep, and the current was too strong. They would all die. But God not only tells Joshua to do it anyway, he doesn't tell him how to do it. He just says, go step into the river. Have the priests take one step into the river, where they'll die. He says, take one step of faith. I got new challenges for you. And you have to step in to the challenge. And you have to trust me. God says to Joshua, you will never receive the promised land, the place of blessing, the place of fulfilling my will for your life, if you don't face the new challenges. You will never fulfill my purposes if you don't take action. And it won't always be easy, but it will always be worth it. And God says to Providence Church, you will never enter the promised land of my place of blessing and fulfilling my will for your community and your generation if you don't face new challenges. And you'll never fulfill my purposes if you don't take action, and it will not always be easy, but it will always be worth it. Because here's the truth, gang. Between wherever you are and wherever God wants you to be, in your life or in your journey as a church, there will always be difficult challenges. Did you get that? Between where you are and where God wants you to be, there will always be difficult challenges. Now, I don't know what the challenges are that are going to be facing you in the months ahead. I don't. They're different for every... I have helped 40 churches do this over the last couple of decades, and every church is different. It may be spiritual warfare. There may be satanic attack on this congregation. Some of you may lose your job. Some of you may have health issues. Others may have finance issues. The church may run into financial setback. As you wait through the transition, there may be disagreements and discords inside the congregation. It will not always be easy, but it will always be worth it. Because you see, church was never about harmony and familiarity. Church was about taking back enemy territory. Church was never about your comfort and your preferences. It's about defeating the enemy, the forces of darkness. It's about taking risks and fighting desperate battles for the eternal destinies of the people where you live and where you work and where you go to school. And ahead of you lie great challenges that only the Lord knows. And are you willing to face those challenges in order to get to the promised land and the place of blessing? So do the hard work of transition. Grieve your loss to God. Give your fears to God. And get ready, because there will be challenges ahead and the road will be bumpy. Step number 4 to passing the baton well is to grasp the baton with fresh courage. Grasp the baton with fresh courage. The challenges that Joshua faced were huge. For 40 years, Israel had been in the wilderness where they didn't really have any enemies to fight. God had protected them. For 40 years, they'd been in the wilderness where they didn't even have to really work for their food because God sent fresh manna every day. And they didn't have to work to buy new clothes because God made sure their clothes didn't wear out. For 40 years, they'd been in a protected environment where God was caring for them. Now, the promised land, the place of blessing, they got to walk through hardship and danger and forced marches and desperate battle against a fierce enemy. Yikes. That's enough to knock the stuffing out of anybody. So God says to Joshua, be strong and courageous. Be strong and very courageous. I command you, be strong and courageous. 3 times God says be strong, be brave, be courageous. Why? Because when we're facing an unknown future and we're facing huge obstacles, it's easy for our courage to leak. I'd like things better the way they were in the wilderness where we didn't have to work for our food or clothing. Maybe we'll stay in the wilderness rather than the promised land. It's easy for our courage to leak. So God says to Joshua, be strong, be brave, be courageous. Why? Because I am with you and I'm the strong one, not you. Your strength is in me. Verse 5, as I was with Moses, I will be with you. I will never leave you or forsake you. And that's God's promise to Providence Church right now, no matter what happens in the months laying ahead of you. He says, I promise, like same way I was with Moses and Joshua, I'll be with you. You can count on it. You have my word on it. When we're facing uncertainty, we want assurance to know what the future holds. God knows your only assurance is that I hold the future. And I hold you. And I am strong. And I promise I will never leave you or abandon you. I am with you through this. We are going through this together, you and me. God continues and says, Joshua, no one will be able to defeat you as long as you live. Gang, that's God's desire for your life. Not the easy life, but the undefeated life. Can I say that? That's God's desire for your life. Not the easy life, but the undefeated life. You say, well, does that mean Joshua was never defeated? Actually, he was defeated at least once, as much as we know, maybe more, but at least once. But Joshua never stayed defeated. Because when he defeated, he kept on fighting until he turned defeat into victory. He lost a battle, but he won the war. The Lord is with you. He will fight with you. You may suffer some small defeats, but you will win the war. The outcome has already been determined. So let me ask you this morning, where are you feeling defeated? Maybe you're feeling defeated in your personal life, and you've lost your courage. Maybe you're feeling defeated as a church. There's not as many people here as there were a few years ago. You don't have as much money. You're running short of volunteers in some ministries. Maybe you tried some programs or events that really weren't a success, and you're feeling a little bit defeated. But let me tell you, God's not defeated. He's the God who turns setbacks into stepping stones, who turns disappointments into triumphs. And He's the God who is on your side. And with God on your side, you will never be defeated, and your life will not be easy, but you will be undefeated in the end. So whatever makes you feel discouraged or defeated today, God says, move forward, step out in faith. I am with you. I am your strength. And nothing will knock you down so hard you can't get back up. And nothing will slow you so much that you can't finish the race. And if you believe that, you will grasp the baton with fresh courage. The best days of Providence Church are still ahead. Our fifth step in passing the baton well is to face the future with fresh vision. Not just fresh courage, but fresh vision. Every change point is a divinely orchestrated opportunity for God to do something new, to approach the future with fresh vision. Now, notice I said fresh vision, not new vision. There's a difference. Your vision and mission statement, you've captured them. You're on their website. Yeah, they're probably in your program. I didn't actually look this morning. But you have an opportunity pursuing those in a new and fresh way. Verse 6, God says, lead these people to inherit the land that I swore to their forefathers. Now, God's vision for Israel didn't change. It was the same old vision He gave to their ancestor Abraham 600 years earlier. It was the same vision He gave to Moses 40 years before, but He was going to do it in a new and fresh way. Why? He was going to raise up a new leader with fresh energy and passion to run the race, and with new ideas and new methods and new skills and new experience, better equipping him for the challenge ahead. He was preparing Israel to fulfill their old vision in a new and fresh and more powerful way. And you know what? It doesn't matter from an earthly perspective what brought us to this point where you need a new pastor. What matters is if you believe in God's sovereignty, God orchestrated this. Okay? No matter what the earthly causes were, God orchestrated this as a divine moment for you to begin pursuing your vision in a new and a fresh way. Because God's going to raise up a new leader for new challenges. And he will not be like Casey. He will have different skills and abilities, different leadership style. He will have new ideas and new methods. And your goal as the team running the race, will you keep up with his passion? Will you keep up as he sets a faster pace with new energy? Will you be open to new ideas and new methods and not just hold on to the way we've always done it and what feels comfortable and familiar, but to say, if this will help us fulfill our mission, if this will help us reach lost more people for Jesus, if this will help us be more effective in having an impact in our community for Jesus Christ, we'll try it. God is giving you a new opportunity to fulfill your vision in fresh and exciting and new ways. And will you be open to them? Will you be embracing them? Will you be seizing the opportunity? And you know what? The pastoral candidates are going to be trying to figure that out when they talk to your search team and when they meet and talk to you. And if they get the idea you're not open to change, that you really don't want to impact your community for Jesus Christ, you just want it to feel comfortable and safe, then those candidates are probably not going to come here. They're going to be called to a church that works as a team who says we are committed to taking the Lord's battle against the enemy. We want to charge the gates of hell and set the captives free like Jesus said we would. And if you will lead us, we will follow you, and we will fight the battle. Face the future with fresh vision. Our final point this morning, number 6, run the race with fresh commitment. Fresh courage, fresh vision, fresh commitment. Verse 8, the New Living Translation, study the book of the law, continually meditate on it day and night, so that you may be sure to obey all that is written in it. Only then will you succeed. God says, come on, Providence Church, don't wimp out. Don't slack off. Don't look for shortcuts. Run the race. Finish strong. How do you do that? You stay in the Word and you obey the Word. You stay close to the Lord through His Word and through obeying Him, and only then will you be successful. So let me ask you, where are you feeling like slacking off this morning? You know, maybe you're disappointed with things God has allowed in your personal life or in your marriage or in your family. And you still do the church thing and you still believe in Him, but you're not sold out. You're not giving Him 100%, and you know it. Maybe you've been giving the Lord 100% and you're exhausted. You know, too few of the people here have been doing too much of the work, and you say, I need a break. Or maybe you're saying, I'm going to sit and watch what happens and see if I like the new pastor or not before I make a commitment. God says, don't do it. Don't do it. Now is a divinely orchestrated moment, a defining moment. Your church needs you. Your friends need you. People who are hurling to a crisis eternity need you. If you're part of the team, they need you to be running the race and to say, Lord, I don't know what tomorrow holds, but for today I am all in. Make today a Jordan River experience where you say, I will go forward and never back, regardless of the cost, regardless of the risk, regardless of the danger. Jesus Christ, I am yours to fight your battle, to defeat the forces of darkness and set the captives free. You can count on me. Gang, ahead of you is the promised land, a place of blessing, a place of accomplishing God's will for your generation in your community. But against you are the enemies of the Lord, and you are outnumbered, you are outgunned, and you are surrounded. And against you is a raging river that is impossible to cross, of problems and difficulties. But standing with you is the Lord of hosts, and He leads you forward. God is coaching you. The angels are cheering you. Jesus Christ is waiting for you at the end of the journey. Will you run the race to win the prize? Will you pass the baton well? Will Providence Church's next lap be your best lap? Your children and grandchildren and generations not yet born are depending on what you do in the months between now and when your new pastor arrives. And when he arrives, he will say, thank you, God. This is the kind of church that I've been praying for. Will you bow with me in prayer? Lord, forgive us for the times that we have made church about us rather than about your glory and your mission and reaching lost people. Today we bow before you and declare for the world to hear that you alone are our commander. Our allegiance and devotion are yours. We will pay any price and bear any burden to win your honor and your glory. We will stay in your word. We will obey your word. We will pursue your mission. We will not be afraid or discouraged. We will beat back the forces of darkness, and we will set the captives free in the name of Jesus Christ, by the power of Jesus Christ, and by the glory of Jesus Christ. Amen. Thanks, gang. May the Lord be with you this week. Live as his chosen ones. Live as his soldiers. Live fearlessly. Run the race well. You're dismissed.